Horse. Those scale baskets, those baskets for the scale, call them scale baskets. They were made by the Passamaquoddy Indians. They're pretty old at this point. All right, so now we have to take the fish off of the herring horse, and people would straddle here and climb up. And we hand them up, usually 2 sticks at a time, going up, 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 and getting ourselves ready for smoking. If you just had enough fish to get yourself a bay, then you'd start the fires to start to smoke. Naturally, you don't have any fire going as you're doing this process of loading the billy. You don't want to be working in that kind of smoke.
Yeah.
But if we did have this pretty filled up, and that would happen quite often, we'd set up about 12 fires. And the wood would be set up in this sort of position, this kind of deal, like this. And they would oil the tips, and then they'd throw a bunch of sawdust, a big mound of sawdust all around it. So the idea is you have no heat. If you had your hand here, you wouldn't feel any heat. Because this is cold smoking. You want to have this cold smoke. All right?
What kind of oil? Just like an animal oil?
Well, they would really use things like kerosene or whatever they can get to get that thing lit up, which is not a great idea. When I do it here, I'm always trying to figure out a way to make a fire outside and then bring the fire inside. But they come with the, I got oil, Tony, and stick it up and say, yeah, okay, great. Put these sticks in a fireplace. They burn up in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But if you cover them with sawdust and this process is going right, you can get 12 hours, 15 hours out of those same pieces of wood. It just smolders. There's no flame whatsoever. It's just this red glow, and it just works its way back. And you have to come in and keep putting sawdust on it. But it's really pretty amazing how long you can keep fires going.
Yeah.
So when the industry first started, people collected driftwood. But then once we got into the amount of fish that was being smoked, they would cut down the wood that they had and just have big logs and work it like that. I described some of the architectural elements of this big smokehouse, right? Look at this little miniature here. We have the vented roof, and we have the sliding doors. And inside, we have the golden fish smoking away. And as you can see, by the way, when at the bottom there, you don't see any flames, or you didn't feel any surge of heat popping out of this smokehouse. But no flame, as you can see. Because the process is called cold smoking. This is a cold smoke. You can hot smoke as well, but this is cold smoking. This is for preservation. And see the fish starting to wrinkle and dry here that way? And this one not nearly as much. This one's much softer. And you can see some differentiation there for those as well. And then that actually ready. I'd hung those up in today's tours. But you can see some of them are pretty well dried there in the middle. And you can see the heads are certainly totally dried out. Huh? Now, if we were smoking a salmon or a trout, or what was the one that you said you liked?
Blowfish.
Blowfish. Well, I'm really not so sure on the blowfish smoking. But if we were doing it, like I said, it would be a much shorter period of time.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4. When I do a big side of salmon, I salt for a while, dry salt, clean it off, then I dry sugar, then I air dry. And then the actual smoking process for a big side of salmon, for me, is 3 or 4 hours. It's finished. And then I air dry some more. And then you usually seal it as best you can, and then you put it in a refrigerator. See, that's the difference. This fish we're not going to put in the refrigerator to keep it from going bad. Right? So we're going to keep this fish up here, not for 3 or 4 hours. We're going to keep this fish here for 6 to 8 weeks. So it's a much different process. We're really not talking about smoking in the way that we think about smoking and taste. We're talking about drying. Okay, that's really what we're doing. We're drying right down to the bone. Okay, so 6 to 8 weeks up there. Now you notice we haven't cut any heads off or tails or gutted or anything. They're smoking away as whole fish. After 6 to 8 weeks, we've established that they're really dry, and now we can start bringing them down. Some of them will be directly put into big boxes like the kind that you see over there. And that most of those bloaters heading to places like the American South and the Caribbean. The other finer product, which would be the boning, which would take place upstairs in the next shed, because it's a more sterile environment, hygienic environment, You don't want to be doing that on a gravel floor. The gravel floor is great for the fire and the smoke, but not for the processing of the fillets. So those bloaters would end up in parts of the world where, if you think about what's going on in 1830, 1840 in the Caribbean and in the American South, right? We have slavery. And then after slavery, with emancipation, you still have people doing the same work. I mean, you still have to pick the cotton, and you still have to cut the sugar cane. This was a perfect food for those workers or the slaves before them. Because what do you need if you're working out in the heat and hard? You need salt, and you need protein. And you didn't want to kill your slave, because many people don't realize how valuable a slave was. Well, I was doing research for this project. Sometimes I got interested in, well, what was going on with the people at the other end of this product, not just what's happening here in making the product. And so it came across something, I wish I could tell you the exact year, but I think it was about 1829. It was a slave sale. And they described a breeding stock, Negro, and they give the man's measurements like an animal stock or English measurements by stones in the hands, and that's the way they describe him. But the price tag is what threw me, that I had $1,000. $1,000 for a slave. I mean, it just went against my thinking, because I just thought of it as like a lower form of life, the way people would treat it, and I didn't realize that it had this dollar tag to the more expensive of the slave trade. And I thought that amount of money would translate to something like $175,000 in today's money, which would be the price of a very expensive piece of farm machinery. And I guess that's the way they thought of those people, as very expensive pieces of farm machinery. Okay, and you didn't want that person you didn't want to kill that person. They were jarred goods and they were canned goods. But if you ate that, there was the danger of dying because of botulism and bacterial infections, and people didn't understand or want to understand the whole concept of germs. So it was sort of witchcraft and devil stuff and God's punishment, or all different kinds of things that went on with this whole concept of germs. There are still people who don't want to believe in, germs. That germs are a part of a reality, of everyday reality. So this was a great food to keep these workers alive and safe. In those same magazines, by the way, you might see in a different section an ad for a mail-order bride. So basically, white women coming from Europe to go with the pioneers out west, or wherever. What do you think it costs for a mail-order bride in the same era? $10, $15, $20. It's kind of ironic. The difference in the value. Once again, had all to do with value. Yeah. One person's a slave, one person's free, but this value thing had a whole other sense to it. Now, much of the other fish, was more labor intensive. Now we're going to bring the rest of the fish down, and we're going to bone it. This is more labor intensive. So we take the fish, put it back on the herring cart, and we'd be wheeling it over here to the pulley system where we have the giant sardine can. It would be sent up to the second floor, and that's, once again, it's a much more sterile environment. Now, for the purpose of the demonstration, I have it set up here. And here there's a little sort of saying, snip, snip, slit, and wiggle. So the snip, snip, you have two tools, a scissor and a knife. So the snip, snip is you're cutting the head, and you're cutting the tail, and you're slitting the belly. And then you wiggle, because now it's so dry that the backbone gets loose. So your choice of whether you want to use your knife or the back of the scissor, people did it differently, to get that bone out of there and then to get the skin off, and then put the fillets in these little boxes, or bigger boxes. And since we made the boxes here, if the fish were longer or shorter, we could accommodate that. For shipping purposes, the fillets would be sent out in 10-pound packages, and the bloaters 18-pound packages, to all over the world. You probably go back further in history to precede this business, and there was already businesses going on with salt cod. You were talking about salt cod before. So the all new thinking about the history of those eras, they're thinking now that these people from Spain, northern Spain, they believe that the Basques were able to maintain a secret